Stef Peacock has lived in Wellington for 10 years before moving to Dunedin, where they reside currently. One of the many awesome people in Dunedin, as was noted yesterday, one of the great hubs of game dev in New Zealand. They've also used to work at the festival, be a creative director even, weren't always in games, and has worked in exhibitions and other interactive installations before moving to games. Stef has a master's degree in design, changes their hair entirely too often, which means they're constantly updating their headshots. And they rock climb and boulder and weightlift, by the way, if you want to join them in any of these amazing physical challenges. So, without further ado, coming up to the stage, hopefully without a laptop to plug in, and getting the physicality they asked for, it is Stef Peacock!
Kia ora all, welcome to UI Vibes and How to Find Them with Stef. That's me and him. Thanks, Rick, for that amazing introduction. This is going to be way less professional than the last two talks, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty bad at preparation at the best of times, but between my own health and family health recently, it's been, well, chaotic. But who cares? Let's talk about vibes. Quick note, despite the sparkle emoji and the word vibe, I'm not going to be talking about vibe coding or AI or any of that stuff. It's just uninteresting to me. But we're going to talk about vibes and how to find them, especially from the perspective of UX UI. I'm terrible at introducing myself, but hi, I'm the senior UX UI designer at Runaway. Been there for almost 5 years now. Wow, time flies. But I love vibes. I think vibes are really awesome. I think they're really important. I also think it's wild that there's this sort of thing that we all kind of talk about and know about, but don't really know how to define very well, despite dictionaries trying. These are some that I found, but like, who really cares? But I think it's a mixture of all of these things, right? It's this sort of feeling, quality, aspect, sense. What sticks out to me is this kind of unquantifiable nature of it. Like, we all know it when we see it or we pick up on a vibe, especially in like the media we consume. And I think that's really interesting. That's really annoying when you are a creative person making stuff, right? Because you're like looking for something that is really hard to define. It can be crafted as well, like we can craft it, we can put it into the world, but sometimes like the players or consumers find it themselves, they create it themselves, they like structure it in their own way. And I think it's awesome that we can find these good vibes in a ton of different places, and let's talk about it. Obviously, good vibes doesn't have to mean positive, right? Like some of the most vibey games I know and stuff like that are horror games, terrifying. But not really for me, so I had to ask some friends about those. But it's still awesome, right? I think vibes are really easy to spot. You've got like party vibes, the chillest lo-fi ever vibes, even a sunrise. Like it's such a strong visual vibe, right? And we can talk about vibes forever, but let's try and narrow it down to 30 minutes, despite my own track record on talks going long. So let's talk about games, right? With the unquantifiable nature of a vibe in mind, I kind of asked a lot of friends and developers what their favorite vibey games were, and I got like a million different answers, which is awesome. And I think as well, what is interesting about the games I'm going to just sort of talk through in a minute is that they're sort of led by all of these different things, right? There's all these different ways that we craft a vibe, that we craft a game, really, and they all come together in this sort of cohesive whole. Starting with my own favorites, Hades 1 and 2, such an incredibly like action, cool, vibey game, or games that I really love. Some other ones, including the incredible silliness of Katamari and Peak, Cult of the Lamb, Is the Seat Taken, and Portal 2, where like mechanics, aesthetics, sound, all of that combine to make these awesome vibes. And again, you know, they can come from anywhere, be it the incredibly spooky Hollow Knight at times, the incredibly like scenic wonder of Journey, the, and I quote, 60s suburban pastiche of The Sims 1. I think what is awesome is that, and notable, is that they're all really consistent and cohesive, right? And so I think that's what's really important about building a vibe in what you're making. Lots of things can accidentally pull you out of a vibe, right? Like it's immersion to a point. For example, what if we really made Animal Crossing feel quite strange? Or when one of those fucking scorpions get you, you died. Now, obviously, that's a really silly example, right? That's really bold, like jarring. But like Hades and Dark Souls are both sort of fantasy-leaning, like action games. Don't get me started on game genres. But this is still out of place, right? The style doesn't match. It's not cohesive. What I think is also super cool about some of these examples is that, like, as a UI UX guy, it's really awesome when sometimes the UI leads the vibe, right? It really sets this tone. You can look at literally any menu on Persona 5 and really like get a sense for what's happening. And like obviously there's some crazy work that went into this. They like built their own font out of like 10 fonts, I think. I've seen a really cool talk on it, but like it can be anything. It can be any menu and suddenly the vibe is really awesome. This continues my streak. Of talking about Persona 5 in every UI talk. And it wasn't even me who brought it up, so. And that's all awesome, and I can talk about vibey video games forever, and maybe that's even a talk that you would all enjoy, I don't know. But I did sort of promise how in my talk, so let's talk about that. And with these games in mind, who are all really consistent in their vibe, let's talk about crafting that consistent and cohesive vibe for ourselves. Let's talk about processes. Now, obviously, I don't work at Supergiant or Atlas or any of those amazingly huge studios, but I do work at Runaway, and I think we do make some cool games, and we make some good vibes. And especially recently, I think we've really like nailed it in a lot of different ways. We've just recently launched Hatch Dragons in March, and it was an awesome success, I think partially because of the vibe, so I'm going to be talking about that, as well as the games that we've sort of touched on already throughout this talk. Kiwi caveat, I'm not saying that our process is the best process. I'm also not saying that like this is 100% prescriptive. But I do kind of think we nail it sometimes, so let's like talk about it. One note, this isn't like a step-by-step, one thing after another. Process is like 300 Venn diagrams overlapping all the time, at least for me. So let's just kind of launch into it. Research. I think a lot of good games and good game vibes kind of just start with like looking at a bunch of stuff, like all of it, as much of it as you can find. And that can look like a number of different things. For us, that means like mood boarding. Oh, that's really low res, sorry. Sketching, finding precedents, looking up competitors, like seeing what other people are doing. Obviously, for something like dragons, it meant like looking up all the dragons ever, and actually having like a 3-hour meeting where our CEO Zoe had like a lot of strong opinions about what a dragon is, which she will maintain was really important to crafting the game. One thing I think can be really awesome at this stage in terms of research is like finding like a touchstone. So like one of the things that I love Hades, sorry, but that's why I asked everyone else's opinion because there's more games in here. But what I think is awesome is the way that they use Greek mythology as this kind of guiding principle, right? Or in the sequel, Greek mythology and the Greek witches as well, right? So you've got the arcana here, or even in the first game, you just have all these symbology of like Greek myth throughout, and it's like everywhere. And it really helps bring that cohesive sort of like structure and aesthetic to the game. There's no real reason for this menu to be doing all that, but like it's awesome, and it makes the game so much better, in my mind. Even something like Hollow Knight, right? The precedent's really loose, but like there's a lot of bugs in that game, and there's a lot of character design that is led by the nature of them being bugs. Again, very loosely. And at Runaway, like research is kind of our whole thing, right? We have a nature researcher on staff for our game, Old Friends Dog game. Hey, Lisa. They like went to the sanctuary that the game is based on in America, met the dogs, met the like people who work there, and it really, I wasn't actually at the studio at the time, but it really helped make the game. Yeah, see, it's great. Those two butterflies, like one of them is a game asset, right? Like, but the other one's the real one. If you can tell me which one, I don't actually have a prize, but like, so yeah, like we're really good at researching stuff. And obviously when we're making dragons, we don't, at least, like we can't just like pull up a dragon, like a real one, and like look at it. Not that they aren't real, but but we still like used our like our skills as a nature game making studio, and a lot of our dragon species are based on real life species and animals and plants and all that stuff. For example, like the first dragon you get is this lizard dragon, and he's great. Which is also helpful because lizards are like basically dragons, so here we go. And yeah, dragons is this more like fantasy world, right? But it's still grounded in the real world. And so when we were doing research, we were looking through all of that stuff. And for us, what that meant is looking up like fairy tales and storybooks and the aesthetics that come with that, right? Like that was a super big part of my job because like basically I'm kind of trying to find like a graphic style. And so there's these Art Nouveau pieces. Cave art was a really awesome one. I even looked at God of War Ragnarok and the kind of awesome Norse prophecies that they drew up. That was a really cool thing. And so like, you know, the intertwining graphics and all that kind of thing. You can really find inspiration in a range of different places. It was really also, the game is set in sort of like Scandinavia, and so it was really useful just having two Swedish people on the team, and who could pull up like really awesome references. For example, this is a Morksuga. He's kind of a like Swedish myth, but he's also like there's this Swedish artist who's made these sculptures of him and like turned him into this pop culture icon, and he's great. He's got a good face. And that meant, yeah, cool concepts came out of all of that stuff, and it really helped us build out early concepts in character design and graphic design. Yeah, to like, you know, build a cohesive visual language and structure it in that way. And all of that stuff is really important because, and it helped us build a style guide. Now, a style guide isn't like, do all this research, do all this concepting, make a style guide, done, make a game. You're gonna iterate on it, you're gonna change it like a bunch of times. In fact, that UI is the final UI, but like, I redid it all like 3 months from launch because we kind of built on it, right? We iterated on it, we went back, we kind of found those cohesive pieces. And that's not the least because I was also doing a lot of implementation work at the same time, right? So for us, what we focus on is things like shape language and visual for both UI and the main game, setting and mood and sound. The creature design had a bit of a style guide outlining precedents and structures, and also from a technical perspective, like what skeletons and what, because we use 2D puppet animation, what skeletons we can use and what structures we have there. The UI was all obviously icons and graphical style, like what are we based it on, how are we structuring it, forms, etc. Brushes, we always build a brush library for when we're making our 2D games because it's super useful, and obviously shading and light brushes and all that kind of stuff as well. So for example, like that's how we work it, and like Hades, I think, uses this really strongly because like in that, you know, that example with the Dark Souls UI over the top, the Dark Souls UI is really dull and really sort of flat, and that works really well for Dark Souls. But like Hades UI is like so bright. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to swear, but it's bright as shit, and like it glows in all the places that you think it should glow, and it's incredible. That's why I love it so much. My coworker Bridget did an awesome talk on UI style guides at Play by Play 2 years ago. So check that out. It was awesome. I think both of these things are really important. I'm going to speed up a bit, sorry. And then one thing that I think helps those points, but also throughout the game, is time. Now, we are all really time poor, right? Game development is often quite rushed, and I know that it's difficult to find time. Obviously, a really amazing recent example of this is Silksong, right? They just spent all the time in the world because they could afford to, because Hollow Knight was a crazy success, right? And that's a sort of somewhat famous example recently. And like, we should all just have UBI so we can just do this. But unfortunately, that's not always true. But what I think is important is like finding the time where you can and using that time sort of efficiently and structurally. So for us, that means, like, Dragons was a year production, right? So not long. However, our lead artist, Laj, one of the aforementioned Swedes, did have a lot of part-time work on just concepting, right? So just finding the vibe of dragons, and they're awesome. I love some of these concept arts so much. The kind of world of dragons is that it's present day, it's real world, it's just in a forest somewhere that is completely, like, it was an old mine that's now been abandoned, so nature's reclaiming it, and all the dragons are coming back, right? And so this kind of awesome use of scale of real-world objects really helps sell the vibe of the dragons and how big they are and all that kind of stuff. In the game, I think they end up being much smaller than this, which is unfortunate, but still. And time gives us time to iterate. I think I've slowed some version of this slide in every talk I've ever given, but UI takes time, and you change it all the time. And as I said, I did entirely rebuild and re-implement the UI about 3 months out. And it was really worth it. It really like sold the final product, and it was really awesome. We also sort of gave ourselves a bit of extra time by using like, you know, our own game libraries and pre-existing tools. It's built on the structures of other games, and so we could use find some extra time there in terms of like implementation and all that kind of thing. Together with time, I think this is one of my most important points. It's really important to just like fuck around, I think. Obviously, there's a time and a place, but like it's important to come up with some stupid dragons. These are the like kosher ones. No, I'm kidding. There's a Q-tip dragon that I'm not showing, but it was pretty gross. I'm pretty sure we are eventually going to do the invisible dragon. I may be committing too hard on that, but this kind of stuff, and we went on like a hike to look at a bunch of nature stuff, and just finding time to hang out with your team and shoot the shit and come up with silly dragons is awesome and really important. For those of you that know, these are all mic, by the way, because of course they are. And you know, like make memes, and it's just really important. And I think that on top of building a cool team culture, that helps you find the vibe, because the vibes come from like within, you know? This one's gonna surprise you. Now, data decision making. Now I know that's gonna sound weird in a talk about vibes, and I especially know that given the state of the current industry, right? There's a lot of people making executive decisions that suck. I know that, but I think it's really tempting as a creative to just be like this guy. But like, it doesn't always work, especially when you have an audience or want a large audience. So sometimes you do gotta be like, I'm listening. Again, caveat, this is sometimes. Not all data-driven decision makers deserve to be making decisions. But I think sometimes we gotta do this. I think sometimes we gotta spend some time like hanging out and making some smart decisions. And like, tons of like all sequels are a business decision, right? Like it's leveraging an existing franchise, and some of these sequels are like incredible, right? They're important, but again, they kind of, by virtue of doing a sequel, they give themselves the space and time to do extra iteration, to do tomfoolery and all that awesome stuff. Even Cult of the Lamb, which is like this hugely, like I think its creative direction and vibe is like amazing. Like I kind of am hit or miss about some of the mechanics, but I think that it's like incredible, and like from a creative direction perspective. And like I heard them speak at GCAP, and they were saying that they basically designed the whole concept to pitch to Devolver, right? Like that's a business decision. And obviously Devolver is the perfect energy for that, and for them, but like, you know, it's still awesome. And they also like hard committed to their marketing, right, in that way, right? They married people at PAX 2 years ago. And it was amazing. They had like thousands of people at their booth. They launched a sex update, because of course they did. Because they know their audience, and it's important to know your audience. For us, What that looked like was like an incredible marketing strategy that built on our previous releases, and like our pre-roll campaigns, testing things like names, and obviously, so mobile's a little different. We did a lot of like UA testing, advertising testing, SEO testing, all that kind of stuff to come up with names and all that kind of thing. And obviously, some of it can feel difficult as a creative to like let yourself be led by testing. But sometimes it really helps and it's really important. And for us, what that meant is that we had almost 1 million pre-orders and pre-registrations across Android and iOS. And we launched with like a crazy popular launch, and we got so many players day one, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And I know that naming a game sucks, but so sometimes like making that decision with data is like really helpful. I will say, maybe this is revealing too much, but we tested a bunch of names, and one of them that tested really well was just egg. So sometimes you've got to review those data decisions, right? Like, I don't think that works very well, but maybe there's a game out there for egg. I make this point a lot across all of my talks, but in terms of that, like vibe guy and data-driven decision makers, like collaboration is the most important thing, right? Dragons was built by a core team of sort of 6 to 10, depending on the month, but like it built on so much work from other developers in our whole 40 to now 50 person studio, including marketing, UA, support, all of that stuff. It's really important, and I think what can be hard as a creative is to like remember that we're all working towards the same thing, right? Like a successful game. And I think that's really important to bear in mind when you're working on something creative, because it's all essential and it comes together in the best way. Now, I sort of mentioned or hinted at some success, but like, what did that mean for us? We launched in March, and yeah, close to 5. Like, I think at launch we were about 4.9 stars. Now we're 4.7 on both platforms, but with like thousands and thousands of reviews. So anyone on mobile knows that that's really difficult. And like, it did really well. Okay, it did really, really well. We were outranking Fortnite and Candy Crush for a while there. We were the #1 simulation game in the US. We still have 260,000 DAU, so that's daily users. And yeah, we got featured in our local paper and on Scoop. And yeah, we've been the game of the day for a couple times. And yeah, it's just been crazy. See bottom left, stocks. But I do think it was this combination of all these things that we did that helped, right? It's time, it's tomfoolery, it's working together, research, style guides that anchor you, finding that awesome thing that pulls you all together and leads. And it helped us craft a hit that really resonated. Because like, this is cool, but like, this is cooler. We've gotten like thousands of pieces of fan art. Like, it's like, people love this game and they're like always questioning the lore and like drawing dragons. And on the Discord, someone will be like, I don't like this dragon. It doesn't look like a dragon. And then like 20 people will be like, it's my favorite dragon. And that's the shit. Apathy sucks, but like people arguing about your designs, awesome. Also, yeah, so the bottom left and the buff guy, the Morksuga that I mentioned earlier, the little black cat creature, they're all kind of guessing what he looks like below the bush. I prefer the buff guy, but the creepy one's good too. And this is truly just a small sample. Like, this is some of the early stuff. Like, it's just been crazy, and every time we see new stuff, it's awesome. Yeah, people have been drawing comics. It's nuts. That one there, it's there's a myth of the Nacken in Swedish folklore, which is like a naked guy with a violin who's like a siren. And we have him as a decoration in the game, and so that's him like playing with one of the dragons. And it's just so awesome to see that kind of creativity that we've sparked. And game dev is hard, right? Like, it's a slog. I'm sure people in this room are in that production slog, and it's been really difficult, and it's hard. So I think sometimes it's really awesome when you do nail a vibe, and you do get the fruits of your labor, and sometimes you get a review that kind of rocks you to your fucking core. And it has genuinely made me cry a few times. But like, I think it's so important what we do sometimes, and it's really hard to remember that, especially depending on like where you work and how you work and what places you work at. And so I think this is the important of vibes, because vibes rock. Thank you.